on the intersection of philosophy of technology and the philosophy of public health. Today, Michael will be telling us a bit more about his current work and the AI-enabled technologies being developed at BIOS Health. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let me get my deck up, and I might actually turn off the video for the presentation and then come back on for questions.
That's okay.
Looks so good.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael from BIOS. BIOS was founded 5 years ago in Cambridge to develop neural interfaces, as Elizabeth said. By neural interfaces, we essentially mean implanted connections to the nervous system for controlling organs and managing chronic diseases. My role at BIOS is as product lead, which essentially means I work on all of BIOS's different products, but it also means that if you have any very technical questions, it's best just to address those to me and I will pass them on to relevant people at BIOS. Before I get into the details of BIOS's technology stack, I think it first makes sense to briefly talk about why we work on chronic disease. Chronic diseases such as diabetes and heart disease account for almost 90% of all deaths and nearly $2 trillion in healthcare spending in Europe and the United States alone, with the Middle East and East Asia trending in the same direction. Yet return on investment in pharmaceuticals to tackle these challenges is decreasing, costing billions more every year to bring fewer drugs to market. In fact, the cost of developing new drugs doubles every 9 years. Today, 86% of all healthcare spending is on chronic care. If we're to tackle the burden of chronic diseases and improve the quality of life for millions of people, we need to find ways to develop treatments that are more effective, cost less, and come to market quicker. At BIOS, we think the solution is in neural treatments. When people learn about the nervous system in school, they often will learn about the brain and the spinal cord and the role of nerves in movement and pain. But what is often glossed over is that the peripheral nervous system connects the brain stem to almost all your organs. In real time, your peripheral nervous system is controlling your heart, your bladder, your pancreas, your liver, and is getting information back from those organs about the condition of your body. It is a data transmission system, keeping you in homeostasis, the right temperature, the right heart rhythm, etc. And that means that the peripheral nervous system is a very high bandwidth data system between a controller, the brain, and a device, your organs, that we can tap into as we would any other data system to analyze that information inside and to provide information back into the system. If the genome is the body's hard drive, then you can think of the nervous system as the body's internet. What that does is open up an opportunity for algorithms that interact with that data to replace pharmaceutical treatments for controlling chronic diseases. So instead of using beta blockers to lower blood pressure, you can apply an electrical signal to a nerve going to the heart to produce the same effect. In fact, the beta blocker is a neural inhibitor. It sits at the synaptic junction between the nerve and the heart, lowering overactivity of the heart, causing high blood pressure, which is being signaled by the brainstem in response to disease. This area of research has a number of names. The more traditional medical fields will call it neuromodulation. It is now more commonly called bioelectronics or electric medicine or even electroceuticals. But the idea is really the same. You use a neural interface to interact with the nervous system to control an organ out of a disease state. This neural approach can be used for some of the most life-threatening or debilitating chronic conditions, including hypertension, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and in the future, we think even diseases of the brain, such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. At BIOS, we use AI to manage this bidirectional control, to both decipher what we are recording from the nerve, to know what is happening inside the body, and to deliver the appropriate stimulus and response. By directly interacting with the nervous system, you can control the organ in real time while avoiding many of the side effects that are common with pharmaceuticals, especially long-term use of them. At BIOS, we do this with a three-part technology stack. First, there's the hardware side, right? This is the implanted neural interface. an implanted electrode directly connected to the nervous system, which is recording signals transmitted between the brain and the organ and digitizing that signal for information decoding, and then also providing an electrical stimulation to change the function of the organ. Then there's the AI-powered software platform that runs on the hardware that is decoding the neural information and encoding the new signals to be fed back into the nervous system to treat the condition. And the third element is the clinical integration cloud stack part. So that's software that enables the clinician to know how the patient is doing, tracking their progress, and allows updates to be pushed to the device to change a treatment without requiring a clinical visit. For the rest of the talk, I'm going to dig into these various pieces a bit more. I will probably largely focus on the third of these pieces, as that's what I spend most of my time on at BIOS working on, but we will look at each in turn. First, we'll look at the neural interface. So a neural interface is really just an information transfer system. It is about turning biological neural signals into digital information that can then be used for control by an application. If you take that very generic view of a neural interface, then you can think about a neural interface existing in a number of places in the body. And what you're seeing here in the center of this slide is essentially our skin implant. So this is a piece of 3D printed titanium hardware that basically creates a space in the skin where, wires that are connected, the electrode that's connected to the nerve, can bring information to an external processor of some kind. And so if you put that neural interface in the cortex, the outer layer of the brain where your cognitive function happens, then you can create applications for brain-computer interfaces, the sorts of things you hear Elon Musk talking about, things that can help people learn better. These applications are a bit further away, but are really interesting. As you start to go further into the nervous system, you put the same neural interface into the brain stem, the orange bulbous part of the diagram here, and you can control organ function. And when you go into the limbs, you're doing motor sensory applications like implants for amputees, for controlling prosthetics and giving sensory feedback. Now, most companies working in this space are locked into a single hardware system and specific nerve targets, but our system allows us to work with multiple nerve targets. Building on our platform, a single hardware system can deliver multiple digital therapies, even many per person. So if you imagine a little sort of pacemaker-like device inside your body some ways, depending on where you put the leads to, you could have one sort of central hub that then is providing treatments to different part of the body. The second piece of the stack is the AI to encode and decode neural information. I won't spend a ton of time on this as it's not my area of expertise, and I'll quickly get in too deep of water. But I think this slide can provide a glimpse at least into the process. At the very top of this, we see those green jagged bars. That's essentially raw neural data that's being received by the neural interface. So each of those bars corresponds to a single channel. So if you picture a nerve cuff, so a little cuff that goes over top of the nerve, has different electrodes in it. Each of those 1, 2, and 3 correspond to a different channel essentially on that cuff. As you can see from there, it looks quite noisy. There's a lot going on there and quite hard to sort of decipher. And that's been really one of the main challenges of working in this field to date, is that nerve signals are very, very tiny and they're in a very loud electrical space. So when you just move your muscles, for instance, you're getting a lot of electrical activity being generated that also gets picked up by nerve cuffs. It's trying to find that sort of signal in the noise is like trying to imagine measuring the height of a piece of paper sitting on top of a 100-foot cliff. It's very, very, very challenging. What you see below that is then some processed, clean data that's been digitized. And so each of those little blocks represents some activity on a channel of the nerve cuff. By pairing this clean, processed nerve data with physiological data from other sensors that we have, like something collecting, say, heart rate data or information about your breathing, we can then use ML algorithms to identify what we call neural biomarkers, which can become the basis for understanding what's happening in the body and for designing neural treatments. So for instance, the neural activity identified in the light blue boxes in that picture correspond to respiration. So it's a respiration event. In this case, a pig is breathing, and we can identify the signals being sent from the brain to control that breathing. The neural implant and our AI is not only useful for developing our own therapies, but will in the future be able to be used by other researchers in some form to accelerate their own discoveries, which is very exciting because BIOS currently has the world's largest proprietary neural data set. And bringing on additional researchers onto this can really advance the entire field of neuroceuticals. And then the last piece, the third part of the stack, I'm going to focus on one specific part, and that's our remote rehab support tool. This tool is already being used by patients and clinicians in the field in multiple sort of trials, including in use cases with people who have orthoses and elderly people with fall prevention. And in an upcoming trial that's not announced yet, will be with it'll be with different types of rehab, both lower limb rehab for injuries and traumatic brain injury. I like focusing on this product because I think it illustrates how everything we do at BIOS is driven by a desire to improve patients' lives. It really kind of doesn't matter if the treatments you use have the most advanced AI in the world if it doesn't actually translate to better outcomes for patients. I think that's the difference between being a health company versus strictly a technology company. The technology is cool, but we really care about it because it has the ability to change people's lives. In developing our own therapies, we decided that we weren't really satisfied with the existing methods for tracking patient progress, where outcome measures may only be assessed every 3 months in the artificial conditions of a doctor's office. So our solution was to develop our own wearable device that grants clinicians and patients unparalleled insight into patient progress through passive, continuous collection of validated outcome measures. So patients can wear this device, which is the size of a smartwatch, on their hip, on an arm or leg, or simply slip it into their pocket. The device then wirelessly sends BIOS accelerometer and gyroscopic data throughout the day so we can see how the person is moving about. We then use machine learning models to parse this data into commonly used outcome measures. So these are actually the measures that physicians use. So not just the types of Fitbit things like, steps or how much sort of generalized activity, but the actual tests that a clinician might use in an office. Something like the 6-minute walk test. So how far can someone walk in 6 minutes, which is used in a whole host of rehab situations, like cardiac rehab or various types of mobility rehab. Clinicians can then use those outcome measures, which are also the same types of measures, like I said, they're measuring in their office, to have a really clear insight into how the patient is progressing over time. So for something like 6-minute walk test, you might talk to a clinician and they may only see that data once every 3 months because that's how often they see the patient. Instead, we can give them that number every day. So they have many more data points to see where the trend is actually going and also get a sense of whether what they're seeing in the office is anomalous. Is someone performing particularly well or particularly poorly just in that day on the office? Whereas if you have that data from every day, you can get a much richer sense of what's actually going on in the patient's life. Our suite of outcome measures that we can passively measure is constantly growing, but already it includes some of the most common outcome measures used by clinicians, including the timed up and go test, as I mentioned, the 6-minute walk test, things like the 30-second sit to stand. So how quickly can how many times can they stand up and sit back down in 30 seconds? Unlike competitor products that are in this space, this data collection is entirely passive. So frequently other products in this space will have someone on an app, say that they're starting a given test and they'll hit start and then they'll go and they'll actually do the test. Instead, what we're doing is watching the person living their life, going about their activity and parsing pieces of data to be combined into an outcome measure. And then we're validating them through these clinical trials to make sure that what we're capturing and calculating actually corresponds to what they would have performed in the office. Patients don't need to trigger this test. Once they sort of turn on the device at the beginning of the day, they don't need to activate it anymore or interact with it for the rest of the day. So far, the device has been used by about 24 patients in a couple different trials, representing about 1.5 years of data. And we've measured over 50,000 outcome measurements just with that group of 24 patients. So you can see how this is a much, much richer data set for a clinician to look at about how a patient is doing. In the next 3 months, we're going to expand this out in additional trials to 80 patients. And by the end of this year, we'll have collected 10 years of longitudinal data from these IMU sensors. While we developed this product to understand the impact of our own therapies, we believe it has the potential to improve care across the board, and not just in the neural treatment space. With this kind of data, we can provide physicians with that deeper insight to how their treatments are working, even just traditional treatments. Physiotherapy, for instance. We can help physicians make appointments more efficient, and we can allow them to justify their treatments to payers. With this data, we can also empower pharma and biotech companies to collect richer data on their trial participants, data that's collected under real life conditions, and we believe that we can do it at a substantially lower cost than existing methods. Combining our neural interface with machine learning and our ability to passively measure outcomes, we believe we've really developed a powerful new technology that can help us have new levels of control over our bodies and lives like never before. A neural interface platform on which a new generation of treatments can be built that can enable millions of people suffering from chronic diseases to improve their quality of life. So at BIOS, our first application for this platform is neuroprosthetic control. Specifically, we're putting neural interfaces in the upper arm for limb control and sensory feedback. So when a user attempts to move their arm, we can interpret the nerve signal and move the prosthetic accordingly. And when the prosthetic touches something in the world, we can stimulate the user's nerve to give them a sensation of touch or temperature. This is different from a lot of the prosthetics that are already in the field that have some control aspect, which uses essentially that electrical activity from the muscle. So in those cases, you actually sort of twitch your muscle, and that's translated into a certain activity. This is a nerve cuff that's directly on the nerve, that's looking at the nerve activity itself, which we think gives, in theory, patients a much wider range of motions that they can potentially use and better sensory feedback. We're developing this interface as an open standard. We don't make limbs, we don't make hands or legs, but we make the interfaces for hands and legs. And it's important for us to do that with an open connection. A useful way to think about what we're doing is that we are building a USB port for the body so that other companies can plug their prosthetic limb into the interface that we're building. We aim to treat a patient with our technology by 2021, and by 2023, work with a third party to build a neural first treatment. By building a platform technology, it's our mission to revolutionize healthcare to enable third parties to create neural treatment applications using our technology. Therefore, we work with partners who are interested in building on top of our technology or integrating aspects of it into their existing work. By working together, we can create a new generation of therapies and I think a new paradigm in healthcare. This is the BIOS team right now. We're currently 36 full-time employees. We're based in an office on Hills Road down by the Botanic Garden. Prior to this amazing team coming together at BIOS, they participated in over 6,000 clinical procedures. We've collectively authored or co-authored over 300 papers and created over 10 first-of-kind medical devices. It's really an incredible team to work with. We are constantly hiring. We're currently looking for neural data scientists, machine learning researchers, software developers, although in the coming year, we'll likely be hiring for a wide range of positions, including in product management, project management, things like that. So if you're interested in coming to work at BIOS, I suggest you just get in touch. As I said, we're based just down the road in Cambridge. I got in touch with them just by sending in a resume blankly. So if you're curious about what we do, please do reach out. I'm happy to chat. Thanks.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was very informative and very much on topic with what we're trying to do with the conference and well, dare I say it, building bridges between different fields. And yeah, so that was really great. Especially liked how you ended talking about the wide variety of people that you have working with you. I think that's very relevant for our audience. A lot of our audience are biomedical people, but we also have philosophers. I mean, you yourself trained in philosophy. I'm training in philosophy in the department you used to be in, and we have quite a variety of people in our audience. We do have a little bit of time for a question or two. And I was particularly interested, you're one of the first people who's presented who's using very data-heavy technology. You really focus on collecting patient data and using that as the basis for your product. And I was wondering, has BIOS Health had any experience grappling with new regulations, specifically along with the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation? And just what has your experience been with with working with these data protection regulation issues? And has that been a struggle to get around, or do you find the policies to actually be helpful in guiding? Just, do you have any experience or any feedback on how you've been interacting with policy?
Yeah. So it definitely affects what we do in the sense that, so I'll speak specifically about the remote rehab support tool, because I work with that a little bit more, and it means being used by people. So we're collecting data on a daily basis in that regard. What it's forced us to do is make choices around, do we add more control processes in the organization in order to collect more richer data sets that might have more personal information or any personal information? Or do we try to design technology that essentially just uses anonymous information? So for instance, you could go about creating these machine learning models by having a lot of information about individuals, like this person is a woman, they're this tall, they have this condition, et cetera, and create really specialized machine learning models that are based off of that type of information. Another route is to basically say, we don't want any of that information, so we don't have to deal with any of sort of the data concerns. So we're just getting sort of anonymized IMU data, just points in XYZ space, moving through, which has no real privacy concerns, essentially. And so as of right now, with that tool at least, we've decided to go that route so far. So we're collecting very anonymized data, trying to create models that there are benefits to that. If you do it right and it works, you can then apply that to a lot of cases because you don't have highly specialized models. But we also might be missing out on some things by not getting that more personal information. In the next year or so, as the company matures, I think we're going to be essentially moving in that direction so that we have the capability to add those things. It's not, I wouldn't say it's too much, but it does require us to be thoughtful about how we're collecting data, appointing certain positions in the company. And so it's just sort of a task that needs to happen. And when you're a startup and you've got a million things that are of the highest priority, in our case, that was not, so we went this sort of anonymous route. Now that we're sort of getting a little bit more bandwidth and a little bit more people in the office, we have the ability to then add in that extra level of regulation or regulatory control.
Thank you very much. That's very informative. And I know that I personally am interested in like the kinds of opportunities available at BIOS and stuff. So I might be getting in contact with you. And I'm sure some of the audience that's watching now or later might do the same. But now we do need to move on to the next speaker. So thank you very much for your time and for presenting for us.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Martina De Simplicio, Dr. Martina De Simplicio, and I'm just going to invite her as a panelist. Let's see. Hi, Martina. Everything's working. So today, Ellie, the vice chair of the organizing committee for BVMS, was supposed to be introducing Martina, but she unfortunately has a fever and a cough, and we told her to self-isolate. And so that's what she's doing currently, but she